But in broader terms, what we're really hoping to start is that it's a curriculum produced by the Beis Avad organization in Lakewood, based in Lakewood, the curriculum of business halacha, and we hope to be able to do some learning with the community on a weekly basis. And we're going to have this first series as a trial, if people can see what it's like. They were supposed to be printed out booklets, colored booklets, full page. They didn't arrive from the printer. Being that the sources are a little small, I'm going to post a PDF in the community chat. So, to our topic. Virtually all sectors of business and financial transactions depend on relationships between parties. Vendors seek clients, and in turn, clients seek vendors. Right? This applies to financial deals, real estate deals, equity purchases. Right? All forms of businesses are predicated on relationships, and the broker is really the one that makes said relationship. They iron out if there are any negotiation. They're an integral part to the deal coming to fruition. So this week, I want to speak about, first of all, address under what halachic medium, by way of which halacha does a broker receive payment? What's their status as an employee? Number two, what level of actualization does halacha mandate for a broker to receive payment? Do we need a completed deal? Do we need an almost completed deal? Do we need only a viable client? What does halacha require from the broker to produce in order to receive their payment? Secondly, what kind of deal do they need to produce? Let's say the intended deal was to sell a house, right? To sell a property. And the sale didn't get through, but being that they went to contract and the buyer backed out, the seller received the down payment in terms of a fine. Does the broker have a stake in that profit that was made through the deal that they brokered, or do they only get it when it comes about through the deal that they intended to broker? Lost the deposit. Does the broker get a share in that? The last question we want to speak about this week is the following. This is a case that actually happened. There's a magazine that regularly produces advertisement. And what happened was a company had paid for advertisements for 2 weeks. The magazine accidentally ran the ad for 3 weeks. And the client saw an increase of profit, as you would from having another week of advertisement. They only said it needs for 2 weeks. The magazine comes and says, we know we made a mistake, but at the end of the day, you made profits from us referring people to you. You benefited from us. We want compensation. So what's their halachic right to compensation? And what form of compensation do they receive? So to start off, at page number 8 of the booklets, again, if it's too small, I posted the PDF. We have a tshuva from the Marashdam. Marashdam's name is Shmuel de Medina. He was the Rav in Slonikia. Slonikia was, a city of immense Jewish habitation in Greece. They had the finest rabbanim in the region, the finest yeshivas in the region. And he lived from the years 1505 to 1589. He was a contemporary of the Beis Yosef. There was a bit of a controversy between the two. And he was approached by the following shaila. Ruvain approached Shimon to make a shidduch for him. Now, halachically, a shadchan and a broker are synonymous. It's the same thing. Both of them facilitate the actualization of a deal. Halacha makes doesn't distinguish between if the deal is a financial transaction or if it's any form of deal that brings about a net gain, a net positive growth. So a shadchan is essentially a broker in halacha. So he comes to Reuven and he approaches Reuven with the shidduch. The Reuven approached him with a shidduch and he says, how much would you give me if I make a shidduch between you and the daughter of Zvulun? And he says, how much do you want? He said, ask me, what do you want? Give me this fancy coat and this thing. And Shimon says, what is it? And he says, just give me the value of it. And Shimon is quiet. with the assumption that that he's agreed to the terms of their deal. Now the shidduch comes to fruition, and Shimon constantly is pushing off paying Reuven for his service. Until finally they've gotten married, and Reuven comes to Shimon and said, we had a deal. And Shimon says, you know what, we made a deal. You did do me a favor. I'll give you something, but I don't have to give you what I told you, what we've spoken about. You didn't do much. There was no contract signed. There was no formal agreement made. I'll give you, whatever, I'll give you a gift, but I didn't hire you as an employee. There's no deal. I don't have to give you. And the Marashtam responds that no, Reuven is right. Reuven is a taina, because what you had agreed to was an employee. Brokering a deal is a form of employment. You have to pay him, just like if somebody comes to you and I will move your boxes for $25 an hour, and you agreed to that, you'd have to pay them, right? You don't need a contract for that halachically. The same is true of a broker. If terms were met or verbally, whatever they are have to be met, have to be paid. So just to give halachic clarification from the type of employee that a broker is, we find the Sefer Pischei Choshen on page number 9. He writes, a broker that was brought on to bring about a deal and wasn't successful, to bring it to fruition, he doesn't get paid at all. And he says why? Number fast in his source. It's clear in the Divrei HaPoskin why the shatkin and the brokers is like a cobbler, is like an artisan, right? An artist doesn't get paid. An artisan doesn't get paid the hours that they put into the work. Rather, they get paid for the product they produce. And a broker, a shatkin, employment is relative, is conditioned upon what they produce. So too over here, if the shatkin doesn't bring to fruition, yes, yeah.
The next line. No, Elaim can be getting the Hatsadim Shiyasu.
Yeah. What? How do you understand it?
No, I have a question about it. It's a contradiction to what he said before.
Oh.
He just said that you don't have to pay unless you finish the job because it's like a contract.
Okay.
Unless he asked him to do it.
Well, if you bring on a broker onto, right, if I think what it means is that unless the terms of employment were not to bring the deal to fruition, but it rather was, I will give you a stake to help me bring about the deal, right? It wasn't stipulated. It was stipulated that I just want you to work on this project. Meaning, simply put, in a regular case, a broker is like a contractor, unless you hire the broker in terms of employee. I want you to try to bring it. What do you think?
I think it means that if I'm a broker, like also, by the way, you want this deal? He said, if you give me, I'll pay you. Okay, that means I approach me. But if I get a call from a guy says, look, I know this house is going for sale, please work on it. Then he has to get, the broker has to get paid regardless of whether the deal goes to fruition or not, because he made a call to him.
He asked him to work on it, not asked him to bring about the sale. Correct. So what we want to speak about is, let's say that didn't happen. Let's say it's a regular case of a broker, right? Somebody approaches somebody with a deal, tries to orchestrate it, right? So we establish that like a contractor, they only receive payment upon completion of the transaction. So what level of completion does halacha mandate? What level of completion does halacha require for one to receive compensation? So we're going to learn a Mishnah in the Gemara that will shed light on that. The Mishnah in the Edom Baba Kama and Daf Kuf Tes Vav Amud Beis. What? So this is obviously precluding a case where there was contract or there was a business understanding, somebody's a licensed broker, right? Then we wouldn't follow, halacha would follow contract, would follow minhag medina. This is what we're really speaking about right now, is someone that does it outside of the official form of a broker, right? Somebody in the back, somebody in shul tells someone about a business idea, tells something about a property that's for sale, or the mikvah, whatever it is, in casual conversation, recommends a deal or works on a deal for someone without, a brokerage contract, right? Brokerage, my understanding is that brokerage in America is a very highly regulated industry. There are contracts for pretty much every scenario. So obviously, in those cases, halacha would defer to the contract for dina malchus dina, for minhag hasayikrim, for various halachic principles. We're speaking about a case where, for whatever reasons, which are beyond the scope of this conversation, those don't apply. They wouldn't have, the league wouldn't have say in it. Be it there was no contract, be it it's not a licensed broker, right? So if you're not a licensed broker, you're not protected by. Yeah.
Because the idea of making calls and working, not always you succeed, but you still want them to get paid.
Correct. So we'll touch upon that. Right? We'll touch upon that.
Legally, there's a concept that if you act as a broker and you're not a broker, it's still. You don't force it.
Correct. So do you have?
Getting a deed like that, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to brokerage unless you're a broker.
So the question would be, meaning, what does that mean? Meaning, it's not that you can't get paid for it. It's that you don't have the rights of a broker if you're not a broker. Question is, do you have halachic rights?
You know, legally, there's an issue of representing yourself as a broker, getting paid as a broker if you're not a licensed broker.
Okay, so
and meaning like on a previous deal, you 5% from the broker, and if the deal closes, the guy says.
Yeah, so legally you can do that. The question is, yeah, there's nothing you can do in court. The question is, can you go to base? Can you have some form of halachic protection? Right? When you're talking about clear oral terms, halacha recognizes oral terms. Question is, can you go to a base to receive compensation? So, right, before we speak about that, what level of actualization is required? So the Mishnah in Baba Kama on Daf Kuftes over base says the following: Shotaf Nachal Chamoiroi v'Chamoir Chaveiroi. If two people were walking, they were traveling in a valley, and the page 10 of the Mar Makoimus, you'll see that there is a gray line on the top of the page. So he says that they're walking in a valley and the river swells and it takes his donkey and the donkey of his friend. Shaloyaf Amana, his donkey is worth 1 mana, Vishal Chaver is worth Masayim, it's worth 2 mana. So in his head he does a calculation, why should I save my donkey and thereby only protect 1 mana of equity? Let me save his donkey. For the same act, I will get twice the equity, and I will be compensated for the donkey that I lost. In his mind, I'll go save the guy. So he goes ahead and he saves Chaveroi, and he goes, he leaves his mule and he goes saves that of his friend. He has no right to claim the loss that he incurred by saving other persons. Claim. What's this person doing? This person is letting his donkey drown and saving the more valuable donkey. So he can't go to the owner of the more valuable donkey and demand compensation for the loss that he incurred for his donkey because there was no stipulation. You decided to do something on your own will. He only has rights to claim the labor that he put into saving the donkey. The Mishnah says, but if they had stipulated that I'm going to leave my donkey to drown and I will save yours, but you're going to compensate me for my donkey, if he did so, then he receives the payment. Right? So that what's relevant to our conversation is the follow-up of the Gemara. The follow-up.
I'm sure they said one dog was worth 1,000, the other one was 200. They're both in
I said, I guess why the guy wouldn't pay. I mean, he said you don't get 200.
Yeah, they you work.
I don't think you.
I didn't
ask you to. I would have done it. I would say my dog myself. I didn't need your help.
That's a different question. I don't think that's the case.
Or else
It's subjective. It's subjective.
I just don't think that's the case here. I think that the case is that if he wouldn't have saved his donkey, he would have had anything.
How would you know?
Well, even if you wouldn't have anything, I didn't ask you to do it for me, right? I don't have an obligation to you. It might be the right thing to do, but legally, you can tell the guy, there was no deal, there's no stipulation. You can't take me to court to claim your value. So the Gemara, what's relevant for our conversation is the follow-up of the Gemara. The Gemara on page 11 brings that Boli mine Rav mi Rebbe. Rav approached Rebbe and he asked him the following question. Page 11, the gray line. In general, when reading the source sheets, you'll see there's a gray line on the side of the page where it indicates where we'll be reading from. So Rav approaches Rabbi with a question. Yored Lahatzil, he went to save, and Rashi tells us this is with the stipulation. V'lo Hitzil, he wasn't successful. Mahu, does he have a right to compensation? Meaning, they had come to terms that he would save the donkey and he would receive the value of his donkey back. He did all he could.
He worked hard and he wasn't successful.
He wasn't successful. And shot him. Rabbi says, Amar Loi, Rabbi responds to him, Zu Sheila, this is a good question, but Ein Loi Elis Charai, he only gets the effort that he put in. He doesn't have a right to receive compensation because they made a stipulation that you should do the job. You're a contractor. He didn't save the donkey. Doesn't matter the business that he lost for the time that he put in. He only received schar for the avodah that he put in. The Mishnah used scharai earlier in the context of the work that he put into saving the donkey. He put effort, and not the mana, the value of his donkey that he lost. Right? They made a condition that I'm going to get 5% equity.
You're saying in a case where he told him, if you save my donkey and not yours, I will give you the schar of your donkey.
Correct.
And he wasn't successful.
He wasn't successful. Correct. So the Rav responds to Rabbi Esvei, the Yeshiva asked the Shaiwa, they asked the question. Seemingly we have a sira because we have a brayso. So the brayso says the following: if somebody hires a worker, lahavi kara, to bring medicines, in the next page, and he comes and he brings it and he finds out that the guy already died, or that he was saved, they have to pay him for the work that he done, right? Whatever they stipulated. It's as if what? So we're understanding over here, we give him the full amount of schar. Yeah, that's why you need Rishonim, you need people to explain how to read the words. But that's what's happening. So the Gemara asks Stira, why over there, when it didn't come to fruition, does he not get anything? And over here, it didn't come to Poil. Oh, so that's what the Gemara says. What kind of Dimyan is it the Gemara says? Hasam, over there. Yeah, it's not his fault. He did what was demanded of him, was asked for him. As opposed to the guy, but the Chamar, he didn't do what was asked for him, he didn't save it. So now the question is the following. If somebody brings to a broker brings to a client wants to sell a property, he brings the client a willing buyer. Just the seller doesn't like the buyer. Not because he can't afford it, not for any other reason, simply I don't want this person to own my properties. Is it considered avish l'chusay or not? It's not considered avish l'chusay, right? Because what was stipulated.
It's common practice. Everybody understands, even the broker, if he doesn't get the deal done, there's no from where to get paid.
Oh, so that's what the Rosh said. The Rosh was asked by somebody who had employed Shimon to find him a buyer. Shimon brought him Levi to buy the house. Levi was perfectly capable and had the financial means to go through the purchase. But Reuven simply says, I don't like Levi. I don't want Levi to do any business with Levi. The broker says, what do you mean? I did exactly what you wanted from me. I bought you a buyer. It's your decision not to want him. And the Rosh says, what do you mean? It's exactly like our case. What was demanded of you was to bring me a buyer. You didn't bring me a buyer. What difference does it make if he doesn't have the financial means? Or if I don't want to go through the deal with him? Your job is to bring about a deal. So based on this, we have the following question. It's a little bit more nuanced. Let's say what happens is Shimon brings a buyer, they go to contract, and for whatever reason, after contract, Reuven and Levi both realize, I don't want to go through the sale and I don't want to go through the purchase. They break away, there's no fine, there's no penalty, mutual determination. Does the broker have any claim? Right? Assuming that nothing new came up. Does the broker have any claim? All that had occurred was simply Reuven deciding that he no longer wants to sell his property.
What was the agreement? To find a buyer or to sell the property?
The agreement, we're assuming the agreement is to bring about, the brokerage agreement is to bring about the purchase. Okay. Fine, so then no. So the Aruch, and you agree with Abby? Okay, so then you're right. So the Aruch HaShulchan, quoting the Shari Ephraim, on page number 14, on the bottom left column with the gray, he says, Uve'esik sar sarois. 14, bottom of the page. Uve'esik sar sarois. And in terms of brokerage, Pasak Echad min HaGdolim, one of the Gdolim Paskin, She'im Nikmar HaMekan. The Mekach was Nigmar, and if you look at the Shari Ephraim, he means that they agreed to a sale, not that it actually went through. ואחר כך בוטלו המוכר והכהן המקח מרצונם מכל מקום שכר אסור צריכים לשלם כיוון שנגמר המקח. He says the Shari Ephraim rules that if what happened was a mutual dissolve of the sale, it's considered as if you had sent someone to bring medicine, they brought medicine, and they come back, and the patient's healed. They did everything you wanted from them. He got him a deal. He got a deal so that he could close. He decided you employ someone to make you a painting, and then they make the painting for you. Correct.
In the first case, you said, I don't like the buyer you're bringing, and I think that if I give the medicine, the person would better.
Wait. If you don't like the buyer, it's like the medicine?
In the first case, you said
yeah.
That if I brought a buyer, the broker brings the buyer, it doesn't sound like the buyer, I'm telling you, go buy me another one, I'm not paying. Then that makes sense. Okay, the patient got better, or whatever it was, you're backing out, what did the work. But if it's the case, the second case you said, where you have a buyer and a seller, they agreed at one point, but they don't consummate the sale.
No. So
in both cases, at the end of the day,
because you're choosing not to close.
I think it's common practice. Everybody understands when you hire something.
We're not talking about common practice. We're talking about what the agreement wasn't how long.
But at the end of the day, if you're broken to get somebody paid, you understand you're never gonna get paid unless it's closed.
Yeah, but then if someone says, I have a building, I want $5 million. We put in a buyer for $6 million. The guy said, what? I'm not selling to that guy because
you're not getting
paid.
I
said, but as you've done your job, I love you.
I never had an issue.
So
I had an issue actually with somebody. I bought him a deal. The guy was ready to sell it, and my guy at the last minute left out for no reason.
So in the interest,
I still feel like you get paid, but I never got paid.
So in the interest of time, just explain the two sides. The halacha is the inverse of what you said. Halacha rules that if the seller doesn't like the buyer, they can say you didn't bring me a buyer. What I qualify as a buyer is everything. It's not just the financial needs. It's someone that I want to do business with. It's everything. You didn't do the shlichus. What happens over here is, let's say, for the interest of halacha, let's say it was simply the seller employed the broker, the seller comes to terms with the buyer, and at the last minute the seller wants to retract, and the buyer is not going to make a problem after contract. He's going to let him dissolve the mecca. Right? So he brought a willing buyer that wants to go through the deal. He's just going to be a nice guy and let the seller retract. Does the broker have a right to claim? And yes, and he views it as
being a nice guy.
no, the broker. Because the broker
has to be paid because the guy is being a nice guy releasing him from the contract.
Yeah.
He shouldn't release him from the contract without the consent of the broker.
So we established, meaning because the broker did everything that was demanded of him, you just backed out. So he have to pay it.
Does it also get a chattel and real property?
No. I think halacha views it as a broker as simply somebody that brings about. It's a relationship. It's somebody that.
Chattel is personal property. If I'm selling, so I'll give you an example. Real property, brokers have certain rules, as Avi mentioned before. You can't discriminate.
But they're not talking about that.
Yeah, no. So let's
talk about halacha.
but it makes difference because let's say I want to know, like, for example, in real property, if I bring you a buyer and discrimination, the buyer happens to be a different ethnicity, you can't not sell if he meets all the criteria. You get in trouble for that. But if I'm selling chairs and the church wants to buy chairs and I'm a food guy, I don't want to sell a chair to I don't want to sell to the shows. For example, do we look at a difference?
If it's against the law to sell the truth.
No, meaning the buyer the seller can decide he doesn't want to sell it to anybody. He can, for whatever reason, he can say, you didn't bring me a buyer because I don't view this as a qualified buyer. And it could be for every reason.
Whether it's real property, whether it's the company. Bottom line is, if the guy, by selling it, is against the law,
So is there a lot, but
That's a different question, guys. You guys, what if he's a broker? They're working a deal, and the guy said, I can't sell it.
he wants, they may want to make a church on this property.
Right.
So-
And I feel like what you never said. You, the guy, have to pay the broker. That's not the question.
Yeah, and he doesn't simply. So for the interest of time, I want to skip to page 21. We're gonna skip one of the shilas. I'd like to finish off the booklet. So we're gonna skip to page 21. The question is the following. We write the question. So now we've dealt a little bit. We've given an introduction for what level of actualization is required to receive payment. No.
Where we are? Tell me about my business.
So
Mandy should give the shares.
Yeah.
So see, this is the problem.
I'm not saying bluff the mice and brokerage, I'm saying individual cases.
So
But you gave me a deal. I can get paid if I don't make the deal.
No, because
This is like $100 money.
so
the end of this year before you say that.
So the following case. Let's skip it to page 21. The halacha is that what we want to answer over here is like we mentioned in the beginning. Let's say the buyer after going into contract reneges on the contract, thereby losing the down payment as a penalty. Does the broker get a stake in that as well, or does he only get a stake if the property is sold? So there's halacha in Shulchan Aruch that if, according to Trumas Hadashin, we're going to skip that for now. It's summarized on the bottom in English. Whoever wants to take a look, that if a shadchan is kamei sarser, or a shadchan is like a broker, and therefore only receives payment after the deal is completed, after they get married, right? Just like the broker only receives payment after the deal goes through, so to a shadchan only receives payment once the shidduch goes through. That's how it's paskin in Shulchan Aruch. And he doesn't. And if the shidduch is broken off, the Ramah paskin that there is no form of compensation given to the shadchan. The Levush, quoted by the Smeh, asks the question. Yeah.
The only way he gets paid is they get paid.
Correct. That's what the Ramah says. The Levush asks the question. Levush asked, why does he not receive anything? At the time, and now, even now, somebody breaks up a shidduch, you have to compensate the other side. Because they broke the contract. So why doesn't the shadchan get a stake in the money that they gain? So the Smeh answers the Levush question because it's not really a profit. It's compensation for the embarrassment that they have of a broken shidduch. They wouldn't want it. So based on that line of reasoning, the Aruch HaShulchan argues, but if somebody goes into contract and reneges on the contract and you make the down payment, that's property. You made profit and you have no problem that happened. It might be a little stressful, but it's taken.
Isn't that even legally when you give somebody a deposit,
Unless there's a contingency.
No, what I'm saying is, if you give a deposit to somebody and default, you don't automatically get to retain all the deposits. The guy can take it to court and you have to prove to the judge damages equivalent to the amount that you want to keep. I had a case like that.
Two things. One, you have to see what the contract says. There's a lot of contracts either say contingencies that
It's
once
not that there's-
you meet the
The worst
contingencies,
contract.
we'll say.
So just in the interest of time, that might be legally the case. You qualify as damages. Halachically, we're not going to view it as damages. Halachically, we view it as a profit that was gained. A lot of profit is gained. You can see that on page 22 in the Aruch HaShulchan. He writes, and again, whoever wants can look at the English. So the Aruch HaShulchan infers from the Smeh's ruling that the reason why the shadchan doesn't receive the dmei knasos, the value of the knas, the percentage of that, is because there is embarrassment. If there was no embarrassment, if it was simply that somebody reneged on a contract, we view it and a knas, a penalty for doing that. We view it as a profit, and the sarser, the broker, would have a right to claim equity in said penalty.
Now, in a real estate deal, the deposit is not necessarily a down. For example, if the person ends up selling the property for equal or greater value, the original seller can get their
Legally or not?
legally. So you can.
Ask a lawyer. I know.
You can, if you're in contract and you lose the deposit, but then they sell the property for a greater value, you can sue to get that money back. But the whole reason why you get the deposit is you can.
Number one was because I explained to you. No,
I understand.
let me do something. When you give legally, not unlawfully, it's right. Legally, if I give a deposit on a property and you are the seller, and it says time is of the essence, you have to close in 2 weeks. If 2 weeks pass and I didn't close, you can't just keep the money. It doesn't work like that. The buyer who gave the deposit 2 weeks for it. I had to prove to the judge.
Just saying.
Hold on, I had to prove to the judge damage and equivalent to the amount they want to keep. So the judge said, okay, you had 3 weeks, you had the property on limbo, you get those 3 weeks equivalent. And even after I turned around and sold the property for a bigger profit, he doesn't get the money back. No, let's do this contracts, have to do one with the other.
Then you're not arguing with me.
I'm just telling you, you're agreeing with me. Okay?
So,
No, but that's not what you said. You said that if the guy wanted the contract, it's not damaging, it is damaging.
so, to move on to the last question that we mentioned with the advertisement, right? Somebody, the case was that they paid for an ad for 2 weeks, and accidentally they'd run the ad for a third week, and thereby they received a profit. So, right, and the magazine comes to claim some form of compensation. So, Mitzad Yosher, like you said, they would be right to claim. But the question is, does the magazine have a halachic avenue? Can they take them to business? That's the question. Mitzad Yosher. So we're going to speak about that. I go to you in shul. And I tell you about a property. You make money, you benefit of me. Can I take you to business?
What's the halacha mitzad al-kishur? It's predicting God. And
So
everything is from God.
yeah.
And
So
you
then
know that you can win in the basement, but you say Hashem will fight the other ways.
That's the right thing. It is. So we're going to speak about maybe. No, we haven't said that the magazine can't get anything. Let's see the case. So I'm going to try to go through this a little quicker than the other ones. We've been running for a long amount of time. The Gemara says on page 23 that Hayer l'stei chaverai. Again, if you look at the great lines, again, everyone wants to look at the English for a summary. Somebody descends into somebody else's property, v'nota shaloi b'reshus, and he plants without reshut, without permission, meaning he gives him equity growth, right? He gives him profit without his consent. So the Amar Rav says, Shamin loy, we evaluate what he did, v'yodei al tachtoina. But in this evaluation for compensation, he is at the bottom end. Rashi explains that. Rashi says that if the shvach
is higher than the expense,
then he gets the
expense
back. If the expense is higher than the profit, he gets the profit. He gets the profit.
If the expense is out of the profit,
He gets the profit. Look at Rashi. So and Shmuel says no. We evaluate how much a person would pay for this to be done. The case is you have a field. I go into your backyard. I start planting vegetables, whatever. Without your consent, or I build you a fence. What form of compensation do I get, or if any?
As the owner of the field.
You own the field. You have, let's say like this: there's a leak in your house. I fix the leak. I come and say, "Pay me for fixing the leak." You say, "I never asked you to fix my leak." What do you have to give me? What do you have to give me anything?
it's actually not such a good example.
And that's how we think about it.
How would you know that it had a leak in my house?
I came to you Friday night. It was a beautiful meal, but it was interrupted by it was raining.
See water leaking outside.
It's big, not in the bedroom.
Well, whatever the case is, I do something for you without you prompting me to do it. Do I have any long?
That's what I said. I told you it's a bad example what you said.
Okay, so let's say. Okay, so for the beginning, let's start with I simply add Reva.
You have an empty map of it? Yeah. I go in and say, it's empty anyway. I'm going in, I'm getting the garden, I'm getting this, then tutti, strawberries. You have Habibi, Chabad al strawberry, they're perfect. Then we go, we sell them.
Very good.
major problem. Now that I can't build.
1 second. $10,000. $10,000. I can't do this.
That's strawberry is not a fruit
tree. $10,000.
But strawberry is not a fruit tree. Strawberry is not a fruit tree.
Okay, so
I need to get paid my expenses and loans. You profited, I want to be part of the profit. You better tell me, it's my life. When you coming into my life without my permission, I don't know anything. That's what I'm
right, yeah.
People get that strawberry.
Okay, so when we take you to base, then you can argue that. But right, like Bendy's case. So Rav says you establish what was worth more, the effort that they put in, meaning the work that was put in, or the profit that was generated. Whatever was worth less, that's what the worker receives as compensation.
I don't want to touch myself. That's what
Shmuel says we give him the value of an employee. You have to pay him whatever the employee would make. The Gemara says, Rav and Shmuel are arguing. The Gemara says, no, it's talking about two different cases. Shmuel's case is when they're talking about a farm, when it's a strawberry farm, and I go ahead and do it before your farm hand could do it. And Rav is talking about a case where it's an empty patch of land and I do work to it. When it's an empty patch of land and I do work to it, and it doesn't need, it's not a shada suyalita, it's not made for gardening, and I garden it, then I receive the lesser the compensation. So you can make a case that would be a case that you would argue in base.
So why not the Chal connect? I say that somebody can touch my own stuff and make money on it.
So if you whip out the vegetables for the profitable, then you can get any money.
I don't want to touch anything.
That's another meaning, but that's a separate argument. We're assuming that there's some level of satisfaction. The Gemara is obviously assuming there's some level of satisfaction with what was done. If the person went ahead and damaged the field, you could take it to base and say, you not only didn't you help me, you ruined my field, be it that I can't build on it, be it that whatever I wanted to plant a more profitable crop, that would be a case to take the base.
He's actually helping me.
Yeah. So we say the Gemara finishes off that they're not arguing. We're talking about two different cases. Rav is talking about a case where it's not meant for this kind of work, and Shmuel is talking about a case where it is meant for this type of work.
So if it's meant for that kind of work, let's say the guy really has
Then you get the higher amount.
Then he gets the value of what you would pay an employee to do it. So
you have to pay labor.
I get it, but again, taken from that point of view of labor.
But what if the
let's
other
say
guy
maybe I wanted to hire my cousin to do the labor. I didn't want this guy.
That's why
so that would be a
What
case.
is he going to do with this employees?
It's a really shot. Exactly. Now they're into that. He has employees that he pays you around.
So now what? He's not going to pay work for him. He's going to do something.
It's not so simple.
Somebody owns a house. Real estate rental house. And they own. They used to put them in they live in a house in
Yeah.
And they can't rent your home.
Yeah.
Because they don't groceries, they cannot afford it.
Yeah.
Somebody go ahead and renovate that place. Rent it out. It's allowed.
So those would all be arguments that you would present to a Beis Din as to why your case falls outside the purview of this din. But it wouldn't qualify the din. It would be an argument that my case is different.
By the way, this is a perfect example.
So
if somebody has a two family, okay, and the first floor is vacant.
Yeah.
The homeowner lives, I just did it for somebody to meet. The first homeowner lives on the first floor. Second floor is vacant. The guy has no money.
Yeah.
So we make it for 10 years. 5 years. I went ahead and renovated the entire place.
Yeah.
And I put a tenant.
Yeah.
It's exactly the story.
Correct. You put correct.
Correct. I have to pay all my labor.
Correct.
Not just labor.
Not necessarily. Oh no. Labor. So the question is So
why would a person do it if he's not profiting?
Well, he's getting paid for labor. Let's say I'm out of a job.
It's like those guys in New York. If you receive, I get the light. I start to clean my windows. I remember those days. I'm like, I did this. Clean my window. Oh, it was dirty. You gotta pay me. No, it's not dirty. You remember those days?
So now we're gonna skip some of the Marmakim. Let's just end off. But the question is, the next source on page 24.
You go on the light, the guy started to clean the window. I didn't ask him, but it was dirty. Now it's not.
Correct. So whoever wants Whoever wants can see number.
No. If you tell them no before he starts the work, it's changing the whole
If
law.
you didn't say that, it's 2 seconds. I remember those days.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah, but changing the window is not profit. Exactly, not gaining.
Of course, you had to do the window. Now it's clear. That's what they're gonna say. I can never land without anything on it, but I planned it for you. I made it.
No, you didn't know that somebody's letting food that it produces income. It's a different story.
So the following. So after we can discuss more later. So the Gemara passes like that Gemara.
No, it's not a food tree.
I remember I have a business. The guy walks in. I didn't ask him right here. I didn't ask him. He comes out to clean the windows. I'm asking you, are you a loafer?
It's not even the one. No, but it's not even. It's not changed to this.
I heard your opinion. I think.
So I just want to finish it off and then we'll discuss it, okay? So the Shulchan Aruch paskins like that Gemara, and if you look in the Bir Hagra on page 26, we're skipping around here just in the interest of time. Page 26, the bottom. The Bir Hagra says that shadchanos or any form of business that requires a broker, we view as a sada shasu yelita. We view it as somebody had planted vegetables in a vegetable garden, and therefore they receive full compensation for what they did, right? So in the case over here with the magazine, what they did was they were yored the Seich Haveroi, right? They went and they did something for someone else in a Sadash Asuyalita, in an industry where this is the normal way of going about it, and they received profit and they want it, so they would have to be compensated.
By the way, in Shadcholus, when you say somebody has to pay, in Shadcholus, if you know that somebody is 100% oko,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to get paid because
Good.
you're not doing it.
Correct. So Rav Moshe adds a very interesting thing. Rav Moshe in 27 wants to know, let's say it's a deal, a form of business that doesn't usually have a broker involved. It's whatever people do between themselves. They know the brokers ever use. And I go ahead and I broker the deal. Rav Moshe is talking about a case. Rav Moshe wants to know about a case where Sarsaro's brokerage is not usually found in that industry.
Example. I like example.
Example, a grocery store. Somebody's a grocer. They usually bring people on their own. Don't have people giving out, recommending, I think you should go buy your bagel, whatever.
I'm a broker bringing you customers.
Yeah, but nobody does that in this industry.
Correct. Uncommon.
It's uncommon. So what's the dip? So Rav Moshe says that's a sadeh she'ena asuyalita, right? So they would receive the lesser of the two evaluations. But Rav Moshe says, but since what he did was a broker, and brokers are paid in forms of equity, right? They're not paid per hour, they're paid in forms of equity. So he would be paid as the lowest end broker. He just qualifies and makes it very interesting that it's not, we view it as a broker. You get paid as a broker if it was the lesser of the two, and you get a percentage of the profit. But again, at the lower end, whatever the lowest.
Anybody can be profit.
100%. All right.
This is so scary. Yeah, I can make people crazy. But not enough. Just go into everybody's business and start to be a broker.
So what? Sorry, back to your question. What was your question?
Oh, I remember. If I'm at the light.
Yeah. Oh, and the spongy. Whatever. He doesn't play this. Yeah.
Because it was dirty.
Yeah. So you benefited. You did benefit, and you would pay him. Whatever. You might have to might be only have to give him a quarter or whatever it is. Not how much he asked, but you would have to give him something. You have to give him something. How you give him a shaman? How much do you have to give something?
It's not so true what you're saying. It's not true what you're saying. You don't have to clean windows.
Legally, it's illegal for them to do that.
He's talking about
Halachically, we'll take into account the fact that it's illegal for them to go through your window at a light and clean it.
So Dina the Machusa, Ami's right. Dina the Machusa. You benefit. You benefit. So I want to. So I'll reach and I'll after and after.
You said that you're benefiting. Somebody put a first class ticket to somebody who cannot afford it. He's benefiting. I don't need my window clean.
Correct. So I'll reach and I'll after and after. So I'm saying, that's the idea. The idea is to have a curriculum and to ask questions, have conversations. So, right, you said, so maybe there would be a halachic avenue, but there would be an obstacle that the law of the land says that it's not allowed. Dina malchusa dina. So this is a broader discussion of dina malchusa dina, but dina malchusa dina does have say over employment, over dinim and chesed mishpat, over transactions, according to most opinions, and therefore halachically they might have a right towards compensation, but the law, the American law, will get in the way and say that it's illegal to do something like that, and therefore, you might. Al pi halacha, you would have to pay, like you said, but also, like Abby said, you wouldn't have to actually pay because it's illegal.
Halachically, the basic halacha is that you have to pay. But then halacha says, however, since it's illegal for them to do this work, you have to take into account the laws of the land. So the whole land saying you're not allowed to pay. But that's the next question.
So now I want to answer your question. I'm going to say I made a mistake. What the halacha goes on to say, if somebody does something that it's not clear if there is hana from it,
Thank you.
they have to go ahead. But let's say this: if you went right after that, or the next day, you went to a car wash and you did the rest of your windows, you'd have to pay him. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You showed that you benefited. Not him.
I'm sorry.
Okay, forget it. I'll pay for the window.
It's one thing to plant a fig tree. It's one thing to plant a fig tree and it's
What? No, no. Let's say you go. You take the sponge. You do yourself.
I always pay those guys in the back. I think I fight.
I decided to do it.
I did the different topics.
Put trees, it's producing income.
Or someone says that your host is on the you went away from the
Oh, it's a damage.
I understand. But if the Gemara says a case. The Gemara says the following case.
By the way, this shows why you're a good lawyer. You're defending your client. Right here, right now.
The Gemara says the following case. The Gemara says the following case. If somebody stands up in a backyard and puts up 3 walls around your property, you would say, I don't want walls, I'm not going to compensate you. But if you go ahead,
I think, right?
it's over here. If you go ahead and put a
If I'm the
4th wall,
buyer, you're the seller. I gave a deposit.
that should next week.
And
Continue.
you retain the deposit for damages, and then the next day I turn around and
If
sold the
the Gemara
deposit
says the
for
following
higher
case, this is what
price.
I should have said it
Did you
earlier.
It's also,
But-
Mike Cutton or Chagig also, they bring
So
up.
it could be, if you have a backyard, I fence in your yard. I do 3 sides. You say, I don't have to give you anything, I like my backyard
That's what
open,
I
I don't want, I like the view. So you don't have to pay me anything. But if you go ahead and you put a gate, you finish the 4th wall, you have to pay me because you're showing that you want,
You benefit from this work.
you show that you benefit. Yes. So if you would go ahead, I think if you would go ahead immediately and go to a car wash, take the thing and clean the rest of your windows, you show that you want to
So do you understand that I can go basically and decide to renovate every people's houses and they're gonna have to pay me halachically?
You
You
make
would-
yourself the contractor whether they like it or not.
You understand this?
Well, you would go.
And you
Well,
find out
however-
who was thinking about using construction, you break
I
the
mean,
middle
But
of
you
the
would
night.
get, you would get.
Ready? I